This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Denise Miceli, Soul Alignment Guide. And welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I'll let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can see that little icon up there. It says listen on Newsly. For those of you watching and listening, if you use coupon code GHOST, you can get 1 month free on that audio platform. We will be on Newsly later tonight with the audio version of this podcast. And we are actually at episode today at 1012 of the Family Electric Ghost
Wow.
podcast.
That's
We hit episode 1000 about 2 weeks ago, and now we're at 1012. That's tracking on Apple Podcast, and it's just really cool to be able to deal with people all over the world and have these master classes with individuals. So again, that's always fun. We've got your link up, and that will be fully clickable. That's soul-alignment-collective.ck.page. And then there's a number I won't repeat because I don't want to mess it up. But again, that URL will be fully clickable when we're published on all the platforms that you can find us on. We're on all the major platforms. So we do encourage our listeners and viewers to click the links of the guests that we have on the show. And this episode, we're going to talk about this is the topic that we were going to talk about, like people pleasing patterns that can turn into imposter syndrome and how to heal and create the life you want. And so maybe before we get into that, you can give the audience the kind of a story, like a brief background in your story.
sure, how I got there, right? So I have the pleasure of having had a few different successful careers, one of which I was an educator and started as a classroom teacher and then became a leader and became very much about change management, helping people to be the best they could be for students, for other teachers, and as leaders. And after doing that for 20 years, I felt a calling. I felt this sense of like, this just wasn't doing it for me anymore. There was something more waiting for me. And I like to share this piece of the story. There's so many other times in my life I could talk about, but when you have something that you've been doing for a couple decades and you've been doing it pretty successfully, it's kind of hard to listen to those emotions that crop up when it starts to not feel so good anymore. And so I like to talk about that because sometimes I do believe that when we have those emotions that keep cropping up, whether it be anxieties or just starting to feel sad, not feeling so excited to go to work, whatever it might be, it's a sign that there is something more waiting for us. It's like our inner self is crying out and trying to get us to notice, right? So if we don't pay attention to it, it can develop into other things, right? And so that's why I say sometimes, especially a lot of times with women, but I've seen it with both, is that we can start to do things in our life to kind of get the love, get the approval, get seen, get heard, but we're not really even getting that in the way that our soul really wants it. We might be good, like I said, I was doing pretty well in my career and all of that, but it just wasn't enough for me. And others could look at that and say, well, gosh, what are you, just selfish? You have all this great stuff and you should be the shoulding, right? You should be happy, and then you start to feel guilty, like I should be happy. But the point is that when we have those feelings and we don't pay attention to them, that's what we start to get, that imposter syndrome, because it's like, okay, I'm going to work, I'm doing what I need to do, things are getting done, but I don't feel motivated anymore. I don't feel excited about it anymore. I want to feel happy with what I'm doing. I don't want to, none of us wants to go to work and be like looking at the clock and wondering, how am I going to get through this day? But when that starts to happen, right, we sometimes we ignore it. And I started to look at the people, because I always thought, I'm old school. I thought, I'd have that career for 30 years. Well, I started looking at the people who were rounding 25 and 30 years, and they were really unhappy. And a
Mhm.
lot of them became physically unhealthy because they ignored those messages. So
Yeah.
whether it comes out in a people pleasing or a sadness or, and I say people pleasing, it can be applied in so many ways, right? We perform the functions, we support our leaders, we support our families, whatever it is that we're doing. And it's not that that is, a bad thing, but if we're doing it in the service of something that really doesn't matter to us anymore, then in effect, we're just kind of divorcing ourselves from ourselves. And so, whether you have a problem with laying out boundaries, I can recall when I was an assistant principal, if my principal said, I need this done, whatever, I would drop whatever I was going to be doing after work. I would rearrange my life so I could make sure I get it done. And I realized that that wasn't helping the fact that I was already feeling like I wanted to do something deeper with my, with everything that I had learned, and being a teacher, being a guide has always been the theme. But there was something about just being in that public arena where I couldn't go into this stuff, which is what I love. The body, mind, spirit side of life has always been a part of me. And so that's kind of how I came to the conclusion after a couple of years of, like, trying to get different positions and trying to make different lateral moves, and that I decided I was just going to quit. So of course everyone in my life, and here comes that people pleasing imposter syndrome, was like, what are you, crazy? You'll have a 30-year pension, blah, 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 all the stories, all the shoulds. And I just said, I can't do it anymore. I just can't do it. And I found out, and again, this is where I'm truly blessed, that I could take a early retirement.
Oh, early retirement.
And
Yeah.
I was like, are you kidding me? I
And
can
you,
go and do and start the business I really want. Yes, it's a cut, but I was ready to completely walk and take that kind of a risk. So when your soul has that strong of a message that it calls you that hard, and you're given gifts right away. There was a gift because I had
yeah.
made that decision. My girlfriend was like, go to the union, go find it. I go down there and I found that out. And it was like my heart just lifted. And I said, you see, you were meant to do this other thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been gifted that. That it was just fell right out of the sky. So that's what got
Yeah, well,
me interested.
it's like the muse. Yeah, I mean, it's like the muse. I'm a creative person. I'm an artist, and but a lot of times artists, people say, "Where does it come from?" It's like, well, we can channel. We can channel kind of like the universe, and why we're in tune, right, with these universal truths and frequencies and tones and paintings, and whatever creative people get in tune with. It's because, like, you can feel that muse. You can feel that,
Yes,
and it's also inside of you. And so there's this capability that's like at the microcosm inside the individual. And then there's the macrocosm, which is overall society. And then there's like spirit, mind, body. And artists are able to tap into it, where people who are non-artists don't feel they have the permission to tap into it, but we've given ourselves the permission to actually tap into that.
exactly. And once you would have a taste of that, and I believe I got that as a child, I was always the one kind of in my imaginative world, creating forts and things in the woods. And, you know, um, I actually started meditating very young. I used to, in grade school, be invited to all the sleepovers because I would do the sleep talk down. I didn't, where was I getting that from? I don't know. I just loved that I could have all the girls in their sleeping bags relaxing and be like, within 20 minutes, they were all, they were out. And
Mhm.
so it was just something that creatively inside of me, it was like I had that calling from a very young age. And then, you go through life, and this is where, as we're around more and more decades, those parts of us that maybe got kind of shut down, oh, what are you going to do, be an artist, right? We get a lot of
Yeah,
those
you
messages
can't
that
make the money being an artist.
exactly, like I never thought I would be a teacher, I didn't really think that, but I always did love learning. So when the idea came up, I was like, I do read a lot of books and I do love new knowledge and all of that. So let's see what happens. And I absolutely, the part about teaching that I love so much was finding that spark in the children and getting them
Mhm.
excited. Even getting students who would come to my class and they were so behind, I started to learn that the secret sauce of that was finding what they did care about. I'd
Yeah.
have like an older student who couldn't read and all the other kids could read. And I was like, all right, what do you love? And I had this one boy and he was so popular, just good looking. He was bigger than the other kids, had the whole story. And when I found out that he loved mountain biking, I made a deal with him. I was like, all right, we're going to gather mountain bike magazines and I'm going to have you work with the kindergarten kids. We're going to go over there and you're going to read them Cat in Hat. First of all, they all fell in love with him. And secondly, he was so motivated by learning those shorter words that he eventually was able to go and read that mountain biking book. So it's about finding what inspires
And
you, right?
yeah.
Finding what motivates them. And they'd be like, they would love to come into the classroom even when we didn't have class, because they knew they were going to be given that creative license, which if you go to, and this is why I didn't stay in the classroom very long, because the leaders were like, oh my goodness, we need to get you in front of the other teachers, because there was excitement about learning. There was excitement about finding the way that different kids could learn so that they could fully participate. Whereas another teacher, look, if you can't read and write in this particular way, go sit in the corner. You know what I mean?
It's all
And
or
so,
nothing. You're more
yeah,
creative. You took the creativity of an artist and applied it to education, which as a music producer, that's kind of what we do. Like we find an artist and we pull out the performance, and we pull out the
yes,
performance that they don't think they can do. Right? They don't think they can do it,
they
even
don't
though
think
they're a
they have it.
musician. They don't think you
Mm,
have it, but you basically build them up and you kind of get them into that path, and you make it so that you're the one that did that. You didn't think you could do it, but you did it, and so
it's,
you guide them
yes,
into that. That's it's a teaching type of thing, and
yeah.
it's like you decide to like the song's not for me. I'm trying to build the song for them. It's their song.
Right. So right.
It's
So
like
they
it's
can
different point.
truly express what they have to give. But it's I feel like when we're children and I actually believe that when we're closer to birth and death, we are in a state that is more that theta state. We're in that creative mode. We haven't allowed life, in the beginning, we don't have all those things placed on us yet. And I call it like 0 to 7. And then when we get up there, right, every decade you hear people like, who cares anymore what people think? And they just become more liberated. Either that or they become very ill because they have swallowed all of those messages, right? But a lot of older
Mhm.
people, you find, they don't have as many mental problems. They're like, they're accepting life for what it is and they're appreciating it and they're able to get more in tune with themselves. And so if we look at those two times of our lives, they're a time of inner work, they're a time of inner connection. Instead of us being so reactive and conditional on what's happening outside of ourselves, right? Which
Mhm.
is why I believe we have this rampant world of triggering right now. Like everything
Oh,
has a
yeah.
trigger warning, right? It's
Everything
because,
triggers. It could trigger everybody.
yeah, everybody's triggerable because they're not doing their own inner work. And it's
Yeah.
such a time where if you don't have an inner work practice, you are going to be vulnerable to life's ups and downs, which let's face it, they're happening thousands of times a day,
But
right?
the
So,
wolf's at the door. Yeah, the wolf's at the door, but it's words. It's not the saber-toothed tiger. It's the words. It's like the words you see on a website. You get in a TikTok, what you get in a tweet, what you get in your message. Somebody
exactly.
sends you a set of words, and it's triggering you like a fight or flight, you know, and you're like,
Yes.
that's what's going on. It's like it's not the physical wolf. It's like this mental wolf. This like electric wolf. It's like
Yes.
it's just coming through, and then suddenly you're getting triggered by every single message that you're getting, and there's so much noise that you're on all day, and then you don't have
Exactly.
any peace. You don't have any peace, and you're getting pushed around, and people are pushing buttons and triggering you, and they get benefits, and maybe you don't. And like, what's going on? It's like because you're not looking in that looking glass and
Yep.
getting that quiet. Like a lot of artists, what we find is like we need actually quiet time, like
Yes.
no talking to anybody, not connected, not listening, but this kind of time to kind of be in our own kind of state and then let it come. And I think that
Exactly.
when it comes, then you know what to do with it because you're an artist. So you get this idea and it's like, oh, I'm going to go with that. But if you're getting triggered by all these outside things, you can't get to that.
Exactly. You become disconnected. And that's where I say, like, I see a distinct difference. And it sometimes goes along with age, but sometimes not. I'll have younger people say to me, well, yeah, I don't do people pleasing. That's not my issue. But what they don't realize is that they're doing a lot of things that disconnect them from themselves. So it may not be directly like having a problem with boundaries or something that is more common in the older generations, just because, some of our parents were very narcissistic, we're very like, you are seen and not heard, or whatever the case may
Mhm.
be. But
Yeah.
that's why I like to put those two in there, because it is kind of, again, this like, you know um, two sides of a different of the same coin. Is either we're working so hard for that unconditional approval that maybe we never got, so we do people please, and it has been a long-term pattern, and sometimes even using that term will kind of frighten people, because they're like, oh, I can't look at that, it's too big to look at. But on the other side is like, some of the younger folks that come to me, they're just like, I don't know why I'm behaving differently around these certain people. Like, it just seems weird because I don't plan it, it just sort of happens. And that's what got me interested, and that's why I like to call myself a soul alignment guide, because I love being the teacher, the guide. I did start my business as a coach, and I was doing all conscious work. And this is the other shift I had to make, and it sort of happened just before the pandemic, is that the conscious work stops working when the world sort of gets set on fire the way that it did. I mean, there was stuff, big stuff happening even before the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, I started to see people would get with me about their health and their wellness, and I was doing in person, one-on-one, out of Los Angeles, working with people on their nutrition, helping people reverse diabetes naturally, and develop workout routines and things like that. Absolutely passionate about it, and people were just finding me, and it was great. But then it started to, I would have this hour and a half first session with them, and they'd have this, oh, I'm so excited about this plan and all this support, and they'd come back the next week, and this, like, it went from like a 90% success rate to like almost half. And I said, I haven't really changed my strategy, what's going on? And I started to realize that as more stress was building in the environment, more fires being set off in all these different ways, economically, and me too, and like all these things, right? It was becoming more and more difficult for people to follow a conscious path, that they, even if it was a path they wanted their health and all of that. I would have, I'd give everyone a free like discovery call, and I at one time, I'll never forget this one guy. He was so like excited about what I could do to help him reverse the diabetes, and I had done it for so many other people, and he said, but I don't want to change anything that I'm eating. And I thought, like, I had to stop myself from laughing, because I thought, okay, you want to hire me, you want to work with me, you see the results from what my other people are saying. But he really didn't even realize what he was saying. Like, he's like, I want the change, but I don't want to change.
Yeah. Well, I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I understand that totally. Because if you're type 2, food is the thing, right?
Yep,
It's how your relationship with food is
exactly.
the whole key. And if you don't admit that your relationship with food is causing the problem, and you're looking for something else, you're looking for
Yes,
some magic thing, you got to solve that relationship with food, which usually is kind of some kind
first.
of trauma, because you're using food to solve that trauma, and then you're not doing it in a healthy way, and your body doesn't react to it, and so you're getting too many sweets, too many carbohydrates, too much sugar, not enough. There's whole patterns, and you can't, like, you have to change something. Something's going to change, and
Something's
if
going to
you think,
change. And so, and so I would say, I said to him, look, I'm happy to work with you, but I don't work, I don't prescribe people pills, I don't do quick fixes. In fact, I would have like, young ladies, contact me and say, I have to lose 50 pounds before my wedding in 6 weeks, things like that. And I'd be like, I don't know if I'm the coach for you. I'm a lifestyle coach. I want to help you change your lifestyle, and we'll do it gradually. I'll work with you, and we'll slowly work on, like, we're not going to fix it all at once. And that'd be another thing. I would send them all these, things to fill out, and they'd be like, I want to fix all of it now. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't work that way. We work with small, what can we get the quickest win? And again, this is where the beauty of it is. I've had these multiple careers, but I've really used everything I've learned to develop what it is that I do now. It's like, we want to get a quick win, but then we can lay out a plan. But you don't start muscle building and trying to lose weight. You don't start doing all of that and trying to tackle diabetes. Now, if you have diabetes already, the first thing we're going to do is show you how quickly you can lower that response of the
Yours.
insulin, how
Yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
you can get off the medication. And they are so motivated by that that we just focus on that for the first few weeks, and they're amazed. I've had people like who will do their blood work before and 4 weeks later do it again, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle. And I'm like, no, it's just your body has wanted this. And like you said, they will fight what their body wants because their ego, their conscious mind is like, no, I need to be vegan, or no, I will only eat chicken, or whatever they've told themselves
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah.
They might consciously have told themselves, or it could be something like you said, they had trauma around food. I'm Italian and Greek. So everything was, oh, you don't feel
Food.
good? Have some more pasta. I joke around that my mom used to, whoever I brought home, she would just see how much of the plate full of lasagna they could finish. And then she would have another serving for them. And I'm like, are you trying to kill the man? Like, what are you? That's too much food,
I'm trying
so
to
she
do.
would like measure their worth based on how much of her pasta they would eat. And I was like, mom, so there was
Yeah.
clearly messages going on there that, and I think people don't realize, like you said, we internalize them and we're holding on to them. And that's really the power of understanding how the mind actually works. There's so much amazing research coming out on it, and it has been for a long time, but we haven't really paid attention. But even, neuroscientists and neurobiologists have shown us that 90% of our brain is the subconscious mind. No
Yeah.
wonder it's so hard to make change, because we're
Yeah.
working
But
with 10%, right? We set these goals, we set a timeline, we put action steps into play, and then we go, why is this so hard? Like, I want this. I don't get it. And that's where, when you delve into that 90%, where all of those pre-patterned things from long time, right? They've been with you a long time. You're not aware when that thought comes up, that negative thought, that repetitive emotion. You're not aware where it's coming from. So it makes it very complicated to understand why this doesn't work. And then you start beating yourself up. And so that's how I got into changing my business, which really was focused on using the keto diet to reverse and diabetes, lose weight, or get people off blood pressure, statins, all of those things. And I realized that I wanted something deeper, and I wanted to help people to see that those patterns were not just stopping them from changing their nutrition and their fitness, but it was stopping them in other big ways in their life as well. So that's
Well,
when,
yeah, the mental is, I mean, it's so important, what the mind can do. If you're a creative person, if you're a musician, like the subconscious kind of dreaming, like what I find with creatives is like we can kind of get that into nighttime, daytime dreaming, and we can access that muse kind of like on demand because we don't put the wall, right? We
yes,
get past the wall, and you can kind of, you just feel the universe. It's kind of like, well, that's foo-foo. It's like, well, that's kind of what it is. Like if you're a fusion jazz musician and you can play like just on the cuff with anybody, you get in a quartet and you get you don't have to ask the chord chart because you hear it. And also it's the confidence. I know guys like
yes.
they know what note that is. You don't have to ask them because you know what it is. And like if
Hmm.
you have to ask, you've been a musician for like 25 years, you don't know what key that is. Like you know what it is, but you want to you go and say it because why? Why do you kind of have to say that you don't know what
Are
it is
you
when you
doubting yourself? Yeah,
you
yeah.
doubt yourself? It's like when you start to realize like I'm not gonna say what key I'm in. I just know it. When you get to
Hmm.
the point where you know it, it's not arrogance. It's like it's self confidence and actually knowing your own truth and knowing
So true.
that you're in that kind of state where you're in this like in the present and I can kind of roll with the punches and there are no bad notes because I
Hmm.
can take every one of those notes and make it work. If you're in that kind of mindset, then you get abundance. You get like it's a law of attraction rather than
Yes.
that like I'm in a deficit. I don't know what I'm doing. I made a mistake. I got to start all over again. I'm not good enough. You get to a state where it's like, yeah, I can go. I can play with anybody. I can just jump on stage and do this. Like, why not? But
Yep.
like how many people stop themselves? They stop themselves because they say, well, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I was never good enough, you know?
Right. And they, even though they may have all of that inside of themselves, like you said, they're not trusting it. They're not connecting with it and they're not trusting it. And some of the best music I've ever heard, and I actually, like when I was younger, I played in a band, and so I have all this creativity in me, but I never really allowed myself to go full on. But the best music I've ever heard is jazz fusion like that, where you're listening to these musicians play together, and this is not rehearsed. This is just them being who they are, listening and just going with the flow. That's pure creativity, so when you think about that, that's to me how it is when you get into subconscious healing, because you get out of your own way, and you
Mm,
begin to see everything that you have and that you've created. And one of the biggest messages that would come to me as I began this work, which was during the pandemic, I was, oh, what am I going to do with this business? I had been in it 4 or 5 years. It was doing well, but I was seeing a dip in the results, and I'm all about results. And so when I
yeah,
started, I was trying to meet other girlfriends in my area. I was living kind of near Long Beach, and I found this person online, also looking for just friends to hang out. And she ends up being a coach too. She's a subconscious healer. Within a few weeks, I was doing it, and within 4 weeks, I said, "Sign me up. I've got to get certified in this. This is the new tool that I was looking for, because I can now use the knowledge that I have, because I still get clients who say, you know what, Dee, I want to work with you. My clients call me Dee, and but I want to do this subconscious healing around food, because I have a feeling there's some stuff that I'm doing, because even to this day I will still get people say to me, I take this supplement, I take this, and I really like my routine, but why do you want to come to me then? Because there's still something that's not working. Like, I have this
it's not,
feeling in my
yeah,
stomach, there's a feeling in my stomach all the time. Okay, well then you're
the
admitting,
gut
thank you
feeling
for admitting that there is something that's not working about what you're doing. And so within a week or two, what I do is I have people just do what they do, but I have them track it all so that I can then try to connect how they feel to what they're eating. Because
mm,
there's no one formula, right? What might, increase my insulin might not increase yours, and vice versa. So there's no, people say, can I just buy like a plan from you? No, I don't work that way. I'm about, what is the root cause of why you're suffering? What is the main thing
individuals.
you,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the
it's
problem. The cookie
individual.
cutter.
It
Yeah, the
doesn't work,
cookie cutter. Like everybody wants to tell you on the social media. You get all these guys that are out there. These these influencers, and they say, "Well, I got this 18-step thing, and it's going to work for you." Well, maybe it worked for you, but that doesn't work for everybody, right? But they want to tell you it does, going to get you into it, and then you find out that it doesn't work for everybody, because people are individuals. And what I've kind of
Exactly.
found after talking to all these people is having that one-on-one listening session where like a
Yes.
therapist or a life coach or even like a producer, like you talk to somebody, you find out who they are, then
Yes.
you customize it to who they are. And the world today, to me, is about customization based on the individual. And we see that even in medicine, they're getting to like DNA level eventual
Yes.
medicine that's tied to your own DNA, your specific structure, rather than being a medicine that's applied to every single person in a certain group. It actually is going to be totally tied to your body chemistry, and
And
that's kind of like more makes more sense to me.
absolutely. I mean, that's the thing that is so powerful about this, is that it doesn't matter. Like, and this is what, why I started this small group that I'm doing, is that, having been a teacher of always groups, from anywhere from 10 to 50 people when I was teaching at a district level. And when you have people working together in a group, not everybody's going to be open right away. Not everybody's going to be feeling the activity or feeling the emotion, or they might have some blockages. And so as an intuitive empathic person, I can feel those, and I don't necessarily have to know who it is, and they don't necessarily have to rehash all of the painful things that are going through their mind. But that emotion, just so the work is really just about not talking about it, because that's one thing that I bring up a lot with people. Many of us have talked about the things that aren't working in our life for so long. And like you said, it's a world of law of attraction. If we're constantly talking about what we don't have, guess what we get? More of the same.
Well, you don't more of what you don't have.
Yeah. And so, can you then identify what is the most present emotion that keeps coming up for you? Like the people change, the jobs change, maybe where you live changes, but that emotion is like your best friend, right? It's sitting on your shoulder. Or what is the memory that just keeps sitting over on your side? And that's what we need to bring down, because it's so strong in your subconscious mind. It's probably been with you since you were a kid.
Yeah,
And
it's like
and so
that repeatable thing that you don't get away from, and you think
exactly.
it's somebody else, but you keep on bringing it like an albatross around your neck
Exactly. And
to
so, and
every
then you wonder,
situation, and then
yeah,
it's the other person, and, maybe part you keep on getting attracted to that other person, but you got the albatross on your neck, and that's what you keep on bringing, but you don't see it because you haven't
yes.
looked in the looking glass, and it's, like, invisible, but it's there.
And
It's
even
actually
though you can talk about it with a therapist and be like, I don't want to have these needy people, for example. And this is very common with people pleasers, right? So if we grew up with parents who were a bit narcissistic, they were a bit controlling and had to have things a certain way, well, then we took on that opposite role, which was give them what they want so they're happy, so they don't like take away my privileges, or, so they show me love, whatever it is. So in the response of that type of my way or the highway, we develop these ways of trying to keep the peace, right? We could call it a rescuer, we could call it keeping the peace, people pleasing, whatever. But now in life, what are we attracting? We're attracting jobs that don't make us happy. We're attracting maybe partners and friends that are very draining. And we're going, I don't want this, I don't want this. And I did experience this in my life, and I was doing great in my career, but I was seeing in my relationships this pattern. And I'm like, what's the common denominator, D? You are attracting these same type of people that look at you and say, oh, you're so smart, you're so wise, and oh, you could help me. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at the size of this pattern. I was, bless my heart, it's out of goodness. I want to help people. But if I really truly want a reciprocal relationship, one where I'm giving and taking and giving and taking equally, as much as possibly as humanly possible, then I can't keep finding people who have unresolved things like me, because we're
yeah.
either going to just sink each other, or one of us is going to be stronger and the other one, you know what I mean? So then I found that that dynamic was very active in me, even though I had in my 20s done a bunch of therapy, talk therapy about it. I kind of fell back into those patterns. And so that's what has all of that prior history, and then going through that career shift, it made me realize that that stuff was really alive and well in me, and that I, having done that work, found this new way of healing and applied it and created a form of inner work that I do every single day, 15 minutes a day. It's keeping me connected with my inner being, and it's allowing that stuff to now fall away and become disempowered. And so that is my passion now, is to create this small group environment where I can help people find those persistent negative emotions, right? And beliefs, right? Because beliefs are just thoughts that you think over and over again, which there's your patterns. So it's all tied together. And if we do that work and we identify it consciously, very briefly though, because we don't want to go crazy with it, then take that subconscious healing to it and teach people tools of mindfulness, just enough to connect with their inner selves, to be able to self-soothe, right? I did a lot of that with students. I would develop things that they could do and try to self-empower themselves in a situation where they might be triggered, right? Young kids, very easily triggered. And what is your choice? So I would find a breath for them. I would find okay, you grab this pass and you walk around the building outside. They needed to be taught tools, and we need tools now. So being
Yeah.
able to combine this subconscious healing with tools, and then help people to create space just by neutralizing those emotions, right? We'll never be all of our memories just gone. That's not the point. The point is to
Mhm.
just let these parts of us, most of the time younger parts of us, know that they don't need to be so hyper vigilant. They developed at a time when we maybe needed to be more protected, but our subconscious mind doesn't know that we're not that kid anymore. We need to actually pull those parts up and say, hey, it's okay. Get in the back seat. You're not driving the bus anymore.
Yeah.
You'll still always be a part of me. I love you. Thank you for protecting me, but I don't need that anymore, and stand down, kind of thing. And it really does create a space. And then we go into, all right, now that you have this space, what do you feel? And usually people have tremendous insight. I know for me, my creativity sharpened, my ability to connect with my inner being sharpened. I mean, now I could dance for 10 minutes and I get so much, happiness and joy from it. I recently went out a couple of weeks ago and I danced for 2 hours, just hearing great music, live music and whatever. And I thought, oh my gosh, I danced for 2 hours. But it's like you said, it's whether it's music, whatever the creative, like if I go to an art museum or I spend time in nature, I can become so creatively inspired and go home and write or go home and create a video and audio, and it just pours right out of me. I don't have to force it because I've taken this stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. It's so
Yeah,
amazing.
that flow state. With a flow
Oh,
state, it kinda comes from finding a way to quiet your mind from the noise, and then learning how
yes.
to kinda train your kinda mind and your whether your mind and be able to connect the dots, right? Because a lot of times, like, if you don't use a muscle, then you don't know how to do it. So your mind and your subconscious learning how to kinda live with it and understand it and actually go through like these like lessons learned, like so like if you're a human being, you have to understand like you're always going to learn, you're probably going to make mistakes, you can't be perfect. If you learn how to live in the present and understand the past, and it's not going away, but come up with strategies, like
Hmm.
as a musician, like our strategy is like if I hit a wrong note, I can kind of play off of it, and you won't even know I hit the wrong note because I'm
Hmm.
not going to take it and act like I made a mistake. I'm going to take it as an opportunity to kind of drive it into a different direction. But
Yep.
if you have the mindset, well, like I didn't hit it because I keep on thinking about the next note, the next phrase, the next movement, and I'm thinking about that so much, I'm not in the present. And so then you're making mistakes in the present because you're thinking about the future and without living in now. And if you learn
Yes.
how to live with all that and
Yep.
understand the past, then you can actually have a tool that every day you know what to kind of handle it. Even if you don't know what's coming, you have a
Yes.
strategy to be able to handle the things that you don't know that are coming.
It's so true. And it's developing your own process. Like I tell people, and this goes back to what we discuss about nutrition, is like there is no one way. So like I may enjoy listening to like a healing sound, different healing tracks. I love these musicians now using like solfeggio and using all these different thetas and betas and all this stuff. And I will just, that helps me go into my inner being so easily. But there was a time where I would ohm or use a syllable, or, I've tried almost every type of meditation. And I tell people this, it's an organic process. Some people say, well, I use traditional meditation. And I say, bless you. But there's no one better than the other. It's what works
The
for
one
you,
way,
right? I've had people tell me that, well, I use traditional, like I'm better than you. And I'm just like, hey,
yeah.
good for you, and I wanted to say, you know what I should have said? What tradition? Because there's a million traditions
Yeah,
around the
how many
world, right?
variations? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
even if you say the word yoga, I mean, yoga has roots in India, it has
how
roots
many
all over the world.
variations?
Exactly. So there is no one perfect way. And so what I like to do is kind of give people a menu and try this. I went to Hawaii and I got some singing bowls while I was there and have played a little bit with that and creating some sounds that way. And oh, my clients absolutely love that. Just like a 5-minute singing bowl to get you into and get ready into subconscious healing. So I like to introduce them to these different things and then let them run with it. And some people will say, I tried that once and it didn't work, so I just went and got a pill. And I'm like, nothing against that, but I'm never going to recommend a pill for inner peace for you.
Yeah.
I know that people are doing all these different therapies and all of that. And, again, not to judge it, but I don't think we need any of that. What we need is
Yeah.
to stop all the noise, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean,
uh,
I'm a sound designer. I'm a keyboard player, a synthesis. So I take sound waves
oh,
and I build
wow.
tones from analog modular synthesizers. So
Oh,
I actually create my tone. I don't sample. I actually take like a sine wave or a cosine wave or a ramp or a square and run it through all these different electronic devices that are hardware and make tones before I even write
how?
a song. And then those tones, I can, take a triangle and turn it into a bell, take a square wave and turn it into a bass note. And it just allows me to kind of customize my tones so that they match what's in my head.
Oh,
So I can actually
wow.
go and create, and I kind of know what I want to do. And it's like a lot of artists just take what exists or take samples of somebody else's work. But I like
Right.
to try to just create my own tones, whether it's even out, making noise, making things that sound like waterfalls or sound like air, rushing through the trees. It's not a lot of cool stuff that you can do with these sound oscillators. And it's just a way to connect because
Oh,
like when you're a
cool.
musician and you see an audience respond to a sound, you can
Yes.
kind of see immediate reaction to your art. And then you're like, okay, I know what this does. When I use this
Mm.
type of wave, it does this to the people in the audience. And so that once you learn what it is, it's kind of like how you learn how to use your voice when you're a public speaker. You learn how to present. You learn how to like the nonverbal things you learn, but it's all still like vibrations. It's still all like whether it's nonverbal or actual verbal or sound different vibrations. Like we're picking up that kind of signal in the universe. That's the way I see it. That's
Yes.
kind of foo-foo, but that's what it is.
Yeah, no, honestly, I mean, I have been interested and practicing, trying to receive benefits of sound healing for at least a decade. And, it was kind of like even 10 years ago, right? Sound healing wasn't that popular. You didn't hear about it. But now it's like, oh, there's just all of these people that are doing, there's a lot of people sampling, like you said, but there's a lot of original artists now that are creating these types of sounds. And I don't know enough about it to even really fully understand what you're talking about, but I get that there is a difference when you hear somebody who's creating original sound that way. And and so what I loved learning about with it was, and it was started with the singing bowls, was like that there are different notes with each bowl, there are different things associated with each note, and there are different parts of the body that correspond. And I was like, this is mind blowing, and so I worked with a sound healer for a little while and found that it really helped me with stress. So it's whatever, like I said, people are going to be interested in what they are, and trying to force people down one path has never been my thing. It's really about helping people just be free of pain and patterns so that they can see, that they have this infinite potential. I believe we all have an infinite potential, but the more that the deeper, and that's the thing, is when you do this kind of work, it just keeps building. Like I keep thinking, okay, I must have reached a certain level, but I feel now that I'm able to take such good care of myself that I don't have as much confusion. I don't feel like I have to sit and force myself to, edit videos, or like I create videos on guided meditation and tools, and learning about subconscious healing and all of that. And then I started writing because I was like, I've been writing in journals every day since I was about in second grade. And I started to realize, deep, put this into a computer because you have enough here for a few books. So
Hmm. Yeah.
actually, since I started being a podcast guest, the co-creative energy of working with people like this and just kind of walking into a collaboration, finding a commonality that we want to talk about, it's inspired me to take all this
Yeah.
writing and to write a book. That's how much I believe
That's
in the
good. That's
power
a good place
of
to put it.
Oh my gosh, of creative energy. So I really want to start with a simple guide about how to access and to understand your mind so that you can have the most power in your life. Because what I feel now when I sit down is I can find joy in the most before what I would have been like, oh, I remember when I first learned video and audio editing, I thought, oh, this is gonna really and I would sit for hours and I would like my back would be hurting. And now I like work for a certain amount of time. I'm so excited about what I've learned. I just recently got myself a nice big monitor so I'm not struggling to look at a tiny screen. And you start to realize that you can make things a little bit easier on yourself. But I just finished a project today that would have taken me weeks in the past because you get yourself in a mindset about a certain type of thing that maybe is not your biggest strength. And then you just find every reason to just keep getting distracted from it. Like all of the things that can get in your way come because you have that resistance. And that's where helping people to
Yeah.
quiet their mind, they can see that resistance and they can make a decision. Do I want to go down that path? Or do I want to, like they say, you have about 15 seconds. If you don't switch gears and go down a different path, find the joy in it, or get up and just move. Get up and go out in nature, change the scenery, right? You get a call and you got somebody doing this whole thing. Get up and change it. Don't just dive right back in because you're going to carry that energy again with you. And you have the power to change it and to be so much more. I mean, I can't tell you how it felt. This is all still going off the dance thing, which since I went to that dance thing and got really so I mean, it was like 60s,
Mhm.
70s, that music that I just was like, it reminded me of such happy times. I haven't been able
Yeah.
to stop dancing. I literally turn on music and I start dancing a little bit every day. And it just gets me like, okay, okay, well, I'll go make dinner now. Okay, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to revise the book. Over the weekend, I took my book apart and put it back together again, and it's really close. I've got 2 more chapters. So, the exciting thing about it is that not only can you reduce these behaviors you don't want, but you can access because you've let those go. You now have space to find that creative energy, to find the joy in everything that you're doing is going to make your life, so much happier. Even if you don't have every single thing that you want right now, it doesn't matter. You can still
Yeah.
find the
Yeah.
joy in it.
Well, it's like that flow state. Like I'm always telling people that like when you a lot of times if you Elton John told a story about the Yellow Brick Road. He said everything's third, fourth take. It's only 3 or 4 takes, and we took it as we wrote it, as we played it and wrote it. And they wrote it like in a mansion, and they kind of recorded it live to a multi-track. And he said he kind of missed those days because he said today everybody obsesses about trying to make it perfect. But if
Right.
you go back and you listen to that, some of that stuff from 73, 74, 75, it's like it's not as perfect as the stuff they can make today, but it sounds better than the stuff they make today. Like, why is that? Because it's
Yep.
more authentic, it's
Yep.
more vulnerable. And by
Yep.
not taking like take 99 versus take 3 or take 4, it's actually
Right.
closer to the original idea that Bernie
Yeah.
Taupin and Elton had. That's the real idea. The further you get away from take 4,
Yeah.
the more you dilute it. You start to
Right.
dilute the honesty of it. And that's what I think a lot of people in their
Mm.
lives do is they try to make that perfect statement. And it actually
Yes.
the more honest and authentic elevator pitch is probably version 3 or 4, not version 99. Because
It's
then
so true. When I think that's what I loved about this band, because of course, they knew their audience. So they knew like and I found this dance party that happened at 3 in the afternoon and I thought, "Oh, these are my people." And but the musicians were much younger, but they clearly understood the power of that music to that group. Because I let me tell you what, I couldn't believe all the different ages of people and how they were moving and shaking. And it kind of reminds me of like the Jimi Hendrixes, like when they would play a
Yeah,
track like there, like you said, it was just there, he was just peeling that track off, and it might sound different on every single album you heard that track, but it didn't matter. That was the beauty of it. That was the organic
yeah, it's
state
that
that it was
moment.
in.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's very jazz kind of. Yeah, the jazz psychedelic age, this few like, what he was doing was very experimental, and it has a lot to do with jazz. I mean, he used to play with jazz guys, and Mitch Mitchell was a jazz drummer. So the idea that Hendrix experienced, it was a mixture of, like, psychedelic rock, jazz, fusion, heavy metal. It was like a That's why it's so different. He was, "Oh, it's rock." It's not exactly rock. It's a bunch of
Mm-mm.
things mixed together, and that's what people kinda miss. It's like this hyper blues with psychedelia, with heavy metal, with a little punk. It's got a lot of different elements. I mean, I've studied it, and it just has all these different elements, and Hendrix was very much into playing it different every night. He had a structure, but he would
Right.
kinda be like a fusion guy. He would go and change it, and he wasn't
Right.
wedded to keeping it the same. He didn't have to keep it the same because he's like, "It's boring if he keeps it the same."
Exactly, and I can remember that, as I got more into his music and the different, the different albums that would come out, like where he'd be traveling, it would impact it. Sometimes it was slow and bluesy, other times it was hard, and so it was. To me, that was always so fascinating because it felt very organic, and you didn't know how it was going to come out on that next track. You didn't know how that song. You might hear a song and be like, I know that song, but it sounds so different. And I feel like you're right. We have kind of over mastered music now, over mixed music, whatever you call it, to the point where it loses
It's
something in that it
distilled. Yeah, it's
uses.
so
Yeah.
distilled. Yeah, it
Yeah.
gets so distilled, if we run it through computers. Like, I still use, like, tape multi-tracks
Oh,
from the
wow.
late '70s, early '80s, because it forces me to not redo things to the nth degree and kinda live with what I'm able to play. And the reason why people don't like the old technology is that you had to know how to play to a certain level to
Mm,
use some of that tech, because if you're not the most brilliant or best player, some of the new tech you can go and have mistakes and then correct it. Where in the old world, you had to lay it down the way it's supposed to
the
be,
right way.
right? And if you
Sure.
didn't get it, then you had to keep on playing it. And so people today, they don't have time to actually get it right. So they just put it down and then fix it after. And there's something about actually putting your heart and soul into a performance and laying it down
In
that I
that
think,
moment, yes.
that's
Yeah.
where the authenticity and the vulnerability, yeah, I think it's lost when you just do everything with the computer. Yeah, so it
Mhm.
sounds perfect, but perfect isn't always what you want.
Mhm.
You know?
Fascinating how the parallels go into really any area of life. Are you trying to create like an item that you can market, and this certain genre that you want to be in? Yeah, then you really don't have to have a lot of talent. You just have to know how to replicate a certain sound or replicate a certain melody or whatever. And I
Yeah,
think
vibe.
that,
Yeah, vibes and
when
rhythms. Yeah,
yeah.
basically, we use, what we call lanes. Like, we have these, machines that have clips, and songs
Okay.
today are constructed in clips of
Mm,
hooks and beats that we know we can run algorithms and know that this beat got like a billion hits. So if I use this type of beat, you got a
it's
billion
gonna sell.
listens on
Sure.
Spotify. So if I'm in that zone and I meet the beats per measure, I'm going to trigger something that people are familiar with, and people like the things they're familiar with. But I'm kind of an artist. Well, I'm going to go and say, well, I don't want to do that. I want to do something that somebody's not familiar with. So I'm not going to trigger the algorithm and get as many views. I'm going to get way under what the popular stuff gets, but I'm going to feel better about what I wrote because it's really what I want. So it's a different audience though, and they're
Yes.
different opportunities. I get
Right.
different opportunities. The numbers don't always represent what can happen. I could get an opportunity to be on a video game soundtrack or get to work with somebody from less views, from 100 views, get to work on something that somebody said, well, you got to get a billion views to get anywhere. Not necessarily. If the right person in 100 views finds it, then you still get a job, but you don't know that from the number.
Right,
So
and
that's what
it's
people are missing.
yeah, it's that power of co-creation like I was talking about. I find, because social media is like the bane of my, trying to figure out algorithms, and you want to catch a good sound for a reel. you should look for this and look for that and look for viral clips, and just, very similar to what you just said. And I like to find the sound that is not viral, that is something that has the right mood for what I'm trying to get across, because I'll want to just put a little snippet out there to try to relate to how people are feeling. I don't want to have, I mean, yeah, I get it when, there's a clip up there and they use a sound that we all love, like you said, one that has got a billion hits to it. I get why they go viral with that, but is that really what I want to do? Like, I'm putting together a small group of people that want to heal. So really, it wouldn't even be make sense for me to want to attract a million people to my reel. So I don't put a lot of focus on that. In fact, I'm thinking like that's one of the areas I would hire someone out, is to say, hey, take a look at all this stuff that I've created, because I have scripts, I have articles, and I'll have a book, all this. Take this and
Hmm.
make some reels for me, because honestly, it doesn't seem worth my time. Like, I'm not going to be a creator of those things. I want to be a creator of things that have a legacy, a healing method, a book,
Yeah.
articles. I love it when I have a blog on Medium, and people will comment like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, that's such a great tool. And I use that. So I'll try to share, inner work tools through my articles, or just share, patterns or things that I've seen in my life. And I've been able to, get a following there. So I know that this stuff is needed. It's just, how you decide and determine to put it out there. I think it's powerful to connect with people and then see what that co-creation creates. And for me, honestly, being very new to podcasts, I feel like the potential is so much better to connect with people all over the world who might resonate with the energy, that you bring, which clearly, if you're at 1,000 episodes, you understand that.
Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah,
whole thing about podcasting is it's not an infomercial. My podcast is a live podcast. I decided a long time ago that I like the authenticity of a live interview, where there's some people that they kind of obsess about the perfect. They want to pull all the ums out. I'm going to pull out any glitches. And then, like, well, then it turns into like an infomercial. And then what I find
yes.
is I like the authenticity of a live kind of radio interview in the moment. And it's kind of like
Yeah,
jazz fusion. I kind of take the same aesthetic and apply it
I
that
like
way.
that.
And it's worked for me because that's my mindset. I'm not scared of it. But I've run into people who's like, well, I'm scared to go on live because I don't trust myself to be perfect. I said, well, you
Mm,
don't have to be perfect. You just have to
yeah.
be you. And then I guess
Yes.
when they're not comfortable being you, it's like so once you get to that zone where it's like, well, I could do it if I can get past that hang up. But some people can't get
Right.
past the hang up. So that it's a matter of just figuring out what you want to do and how you want to
Hmm.
present. But it gives the audience, I think, something that feels real
Absolutely. And I like the
because it
parallel
is real. I'm
between,
not faking it. I'm not
yeah,
phoning it in.
to
That's
jump
kind of
on,
that's the idea.
honestly, when you said it was live like that, I was like, oh, how exciting. Because it is about that trust. It's about knowing it, what it is you want to talk about. I mean, I can remember my first few, I was like, oh, what are they going to ask me? And, some of them have like a call beforehand, but I can see where like some of them take like weeks and weeks and weeks, some months before they release an episode. So they're clearly obsessing about the perfection of it, right? So it becomes less of a, like you said, it's more of an infomercial rather than just two people having a great conversation. Like, look at all the ways we've woven what we both do into, this high idea of healing. And I'm sure
Yeah,
you do that all the time, because it's that trusting in yourself, knowing yourself, and feeling confident, and feeling like you really have something that that people want more of. They want to see how it plays with other people, and being a creator, it takes many forms, and um I have a younger sister who has been in financial has her own financial business, and it's been very successful for her. But recently she discovered that she has art in her. Now, when she was younger, she took a
and
lot of photographs, but then she put it aside. She took her garage and created a studio. She's pumping out canvas after canvas in her spare time. And I looked at some of it. She showed me a website she's putting together. And I said, these are real. These are art. Like, what are you doing to promote this? I know people who would buy this. This is amazing. And she has a interior designer friend. He said the same thing. He said, I could see wallpaper, I could see this, I could see that. So she's created an art out of just her own, it's been sitting there inside of her. And she got to a
Yeah,
point in
all
her
this static.
life
Yeah.
where she could tell that what she's doing, she doesn't want to do forever. And I said, you could transition this. You could let that
Mm.
stuff go. Now she's going to, need some work to get to that. But I said, look at I could have, I could be a superintendent right now. Just the word even now just makes me, and I've had other things where like little things will pop up in my LinkedIn and they're like, what would you be interested in this? And I'm like, yes and no. Like there's a part of me that, oh,
Yeah.
let me get I lost the screen for some reason. But anyway, so yeah, there's a part of me that's like, "Oh, wow, I could do that job." But then there's a part of me that's like, "That's not who you are anymore, D. That's not who you are." It's okay that that
Hmm.
came across your path, but it's probably just coming up to remind you, how much that where you are right now is where you're supposed to be, And
Yeah.
so
It's
it's pretty
definitely like it's a process to discover that to get when you give yourself the permission to live out your kind of childhood dream. A lot of people want to be a musician, they want to be a dancer, they want to in the theater, and then somebody told them, well, you can't make money doing that. You can't have a living doing that. You can't take care of your kids doing that. So then like they let it go, and then we get to like I'm age 57, so you get to this age and you're like, well, why not? Why can't I do something? So you do
Yeah,
it.
and it's, you only have this one life right now. I mean, depending on your belief system, I believe that we come and go into different forms, but I believe that we are here for a purpose. And that's where if you can get in alignment with who you truly are, you can then access that and say, you know what, I'm ready for this creative work. And so I have a feeling that this first book here will just be the beginning of that, but I'm so
Yeah,
passionate about the
definitely.
power of co-creation as well. Like next week I have a podcast interview with a person who works with people on nutrition, and I'm like, ooh, I wonder what we could co-create together. And she's so interested because people are hearing about subconscious healing, but they don't know how it would be able to help their people. So there's just an infinite potential to create when when you have these things out of
Yeah,
your way
the
and you're
collective.
not. Yeah, so it's pretty exciting.
I mean, the podcast for me has created opportunities, like you're saying. So there's sometimes I've had situations that way. Oh, well, I guess we're done.